Okay. Okay, so let's start. Hi everyone. So my name is Matthieu Glachant. I'm from the École des Mines de Paris. So mine's ParisTech, the English name. And I will chair this session. So we have 4 speakers on a very important topic, given the size of the CO2 emissions by this sector, so residential energy efficiency. I remind you a few words about the rules. There are 4 presentations. Each slot is 25 minutes long, 20 minutes of presentation by each speaker, and then 5 minutes for Q&As. For Q&As, we have 2 options. Either you ask your questions in the chat, or you raise your hand and you can ask them directly orally in the session. Okay. And so now we start with Janez Dolšak. I'm not sure that my pronunciation is right. With a paper on, in fact, the efficiency in the use of energy. So, Janez, you have the floor for 20 minutes.
So, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to finally present this work. I'm Janez Dolšak, and today I will present work in progress, which is entitled Estimating the Efficiency in Overall Energy Consumption. It's evidence from Slovenian household level data. This work is co-authored with Professor Nevenka Hrovatin and Professor Jelena Zoric. Okay, the motivation is still increasing energy demand. In industrial countries, the residential sector is responsible for more than 30% of the overall energy end use. And so the energy efficiency plays an important role in most national energy strategies to achieve energy savings. The demand for energy in the residential sector is increased by 1.4% on average since 2014, despite the fact that energy efficiency improvements decreased the demand by 0.9% in the period 2014-2019. This discrepancy is mostly due to the increase in the availability of energy services and due to changes in consumer preferences and behavior. Moreover, about that, the residential buildings are indeed designed and constructed more efficiently nowadays, and the residents use the appliances that they use are more energy efficient. However, on the other hand, the building floor on average is larger and residents own more energy appliances. However, the potential for improvements in energy saving exists and could be exploited in several ways. Next, identification. So identifying the potential for energy saving is thus crucial prerequisite for successful implementation of energy consumption reduction measures. But this calls for reliable estimates of existing inefficiency in energy use. Energy inefficiency could be a result of using inefficient heating system or inefficient appliances instead of efficient equipment, or a result of using home appliances or heating systems suboptimally. So two ways are important. Are these devices, appliances, systems inefficient, or we use them suboptimally? Factors causing energy inefficiency in the residential sector have been widely discussed in the literature and mainly associated with energy efficiency gap. In the literature have, for example, classified the causes of residential energy inefficiency and emphasized the role of market failures, mainly information unavailability and behavioral failures such as bounded rationality. As emphasized, the information on the potential for energy saving is a key importance for developing adequate policy measure, especially in countries where this significant potential exists. the current state of Slovenian energy sector is that the Slovenian residential sector accounted for 21% of total energy consumption in 2018. And according to existing estimates, there exists around 40% of potential for reduction of energy efficiency. But this estimates is from a technical aspect of increasing the efficiency of appliances of houses, but clearly the behavioral aspect is neglected. High potential for energy savings have already encouraged European as well as Slovenian energy policy to assess the current energy efficient levels of buildings. And also several measures were legislated towards this aim. So literature review, in order to estimate the energy efficiency in the residential sector, theory literature uses on one hand, on one side frontier, and on the other side non-frontier approaches. We believe that the frontier approaches are more appropriate in case of estimating the energy efficiency in the residential sector. And similar studies have been conducted also for various countries, regions, industries, firms, buildings, as well households, as said. And then using frontier approaches, we can use further divide these approaches using parametric or non-parametric methods. And stochastic frontier analysis is one of the parametric methods where we assume that that the efficiencies are distributed according to one specific distribution. So going further with stochastic frontier analysis, two approaches are mostly used. One is energy input demand function, and the other is subvector Shepard distance function. Regardless of the method used, the use of this aggregated data is scarce, although it can add more detail to the understanding of household behavior due to their heterogeneity. Several studies have been conducted. Wayman Jones found that in Portugal, in Portuguese household there is around 60% of energy efficiency on average. Broadstock et al. Found that in Chinese household there is 60% of efficiency in electricity consumption. Also, Wayman Jones et al. Found the efficiency, look for efficiency in electricity consumption. Bogen found that in Switzerland, 75 to 80% is the efficiency is an average in years 2005 and 2010. And Blasch et al. Found that that also again in Switzerland households are on average 67% efficient. Alberini and Filippini went one step further. They also included gas in the energy mix and evaluated and estimated that US households are on average 73% efficient in using electricity and gas. So the theoretical framework of this work, the residential demand for energy stems from the demand for energy services. So the demand for energy is derived demand, not direct demand, because consumers, households, they demand energy services, but they need to have, of course, energy combined with energy appliances to produce energy services, and this is the main idea behind this approach. So having on one side energy inputs and on the other side capital inputs. In our study we use energy as an input. It's a combination of multiple energy sources which are used in households. This is electricity, wooden biomass, natural gas, heating oil, district heat, etc. And capital on the other side, these are electrical appliances, heating system, cooling systems, etc. And Now, following the standard approach, it is assumed that for the production of a given level of energy services, household try to minimize the use of inputs, meaning inputs, capital and energy. But relaxing, so going further with the approach, relaxing the assumption of standard production theory enables us to obtain models where household could minimize one of these inputs, not all of them, and this relaxation is so-called a non-radial measure of efficiency, which allows to non-proportional reduction in inputs, which is suitable for our case as we are interested in the reduction of energy, not energy appliances. But so there are also another approaches how to use distance function. So distance function meaning that we are interested only in one input, and a distance function is suitable tool to evaluate, to direct only on one input. There are different approaches, but we applied, and according to the literature, the subvector Shepard distance function, which was developed from the Shepard distance function. So here we present the subvector Shepard energy input distance function. On the left hand side, we have negative logarithm of energy as an input. So we took production function and then we rewrite it, and the dependent variable in this regression will be the negative log of energy. On the right hand side, we have multiple terms, and this is written in a translog functional form. What are these terms? First, on the right hand side is another input, is the stock of appliances, capital input, and then a number of household member, HS, and ES, which are the J energy services. So mixing inputs and outputs on this variable in order to estimate the efficiency. But what is efficiency here? UI, so two error terms are here, VI and UI. VI is the standard error term, normal distributed as assumed. It's normal, it's a standard error term in regression analysis, and UI is associated with the logarithm of a distance from a frontier, and this is associated, of course, with the efficiency of a household. Here we will assume that this error term UI, which is associated with energy efficiency, is half normal distributed, as we assume that the efficiency of household is half normally distributed. So the data here, we use the data microdata collection for energy consumption in household in Slovenia, which was conducted by Statistical Office in 2010 and 2014. The data was collected through telephone interviews, and Statistical Office assures the representatives of the sample. The total size of the sample is 6,882, almost 4,000 in 2010 and almost 3,000 in 2014. It's really rich data. It includes the characteristics of houses, the stock of appliances, characteristics of appliances, say size, age, for example, the usage of appliances, energy services, how much they use each electrical or energy appliance, and the annual energy consumption. The number and frequency of use of energy appliances is reported in detail and offers the opportunity to estimate its impact on the level of energy efficiency. The respondents were asked for the total number of appliances, their main characteristics, as well as their frequency of use. And this table presents energy appliances by their type and parameters. So this there are 8 major groups of appliances, and on the other hand, we for these appliances we calculated the number of energy services, so the frequency of usage of use of these appliances. Here are heating appliances, hot water, air conditioning, lighting, food cooling, washing, drying, cooking, and entertainment appliances. So descriptive statistic, the comparison between two samples in 2010 and 2014, we observed that energy consumption in kilowatt hours decreased from 2010 to 2014. This is mostly due to the more efficient heating appliances, heating systems, and also due to the mild winter in 2014. Interestingly, the energy appliances, accordingly, the capacity of energy appliances, so the whole power, so the expected consumption, yearly consumption of all appliances installed in the household is decreased from 2010 to 2014. But interestingly, this is mostly due to the smaller capacity of heating appliances, while the capacity of electrical appliances increased. This is in line with what we told in the first slide in the introduction. We told that households now own more energy appliances. So on average, the amount of energy services between years increased. So the frequency of use. Of most energy services, but decreased for air conditioning, washing, and drying. Despite some small differences in these samples, they are pretty much similar and could be compared. But no matter the comparison, no matter the fact that they are similar, we conducted the analysis for separate samples. And here are the results of sub-vector Shepherd distance function, a regression. We will interpret only translog functional form, which we found more reliable. So what we would expect, so remembering that that dependent variable was negative log of energy, so the coefficients and the signs in front of the coefficients are must be explained, interpreted in opposite ways. So the negative input coefficient of the distance function suggests an increase, while the positive coefficient imply a decrease in energy use. For example, energy appliances, which is another input we have, which is not significant in translog functional forms, but anyway, this coefficient is positive. Let's for example we interpreted this coefficient, and this suggests a decrease of energy use. So increasing energy appliances, the average consumption of energy appliances would suggest a decrease of energy. So having two inputs, if we increase one input, we should expect that other input will decrease in standard production function theory. Looking for energy services, almost all energy services have negative sign, except for entertainment services, but the negative sign is as expected. So negative mean increase of energy. So demanding more energy services, it must go in line with the more consumed energy. But for entertainment, there is a different story. We believe that this explanation could be explained in a way that wealthier households, but we cannot control for financial status of households because we don't have data. we could believe that more wealthier households are more energy efficient, have more energy efficient buildings, but they also own more energy appliances, and that's why on average they have more appliances and they use less energy. Looking also at the household characteristic control variables, the signs are as expected. Dwelling age increases energy use, which is as expected, as older buildings are typically built according to lower energy efficiency standards. Also, households in cities on average use less energy, especially those in multi-dwelling houses, as we see the next coefficient. Business activity, on the other hand, increases energy use. So business activity, having at home some sort of manufacturing craft activity, also increases the energy use as expected.
Janez, you have 2 minutes left, huh?
Okay. So energy efficient retrofits in the past, as expected, decrease the energy use. These results are as expected. So in average efficiency of Slovenian households, we found that in 2010 there was a 25.1% of inefficiency, while it decreased to 2014. We also controlled for many other control variables that could detect different levels of efficiency. So we did some robustness checks. We estimate also the heteroscedasticity frontier model when the control variables not influence the efficiency, but also are included as a factors of production process. But the results were not significant, and the model was not further explored. We also checked for the correlation, especially in translog functional form, where we have many different terms. And we omit all variables that were correlated. In addition, future work should also explore the different types of households. For example, those that generate electricity, those that have more digitalized home. But this is not a part of this survey because it was done 2010-2014. What means that not so large proportion, especially in Slovenia, were not so large proportion of consumers that have such technology. So contribution. So the main contribution of this part is here we use. This is one of the few studies that includes energy services in the stochastic frontier framework through the input distance function, which was used to evaluate the efficiency of energy consumption. But most importantly, we used.
You need to conclude, Janez, huh?
Yeah.
So this is contribution one. I mean, it's.
This is the last. This is the last slide,
right.
Which I think is the most important. What we used. What is the main contribution of this work? Previous studies estimated the efficiency only on electricity, but we want to, as we think that there is many dependency between the energy sources in household energy appliances, we try to include as many as possible energy sources in a one equation. We controlled for different technologies, but we included all in the same, let's say, same house. And this is the main contribution of our work. And okay. I think is the most important. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Janez, for the nice presentation. So, do you have questions in the audience or other speakers? I have some. In fact, I have many, but many of them are because I'm not so familiar with this technique. What about fuel switching? Because you aggregate the different energy vectors. So one way to move to the frontier is to switch, to change of fuel. So how do you deal with this in this approach? The second question is more general. So, okay, you measure the distance to the frontier. What is important is the cost of moving to the frontier. Do you have any indication of that with this approach?
May I? Okay.
Yeah, of course. These are my two questions.
First of all, so we did think about what is happening when you move. What is the cost when, let's say, how to? So you have to switch when you want to switch from frontier to frontier. What is your aim to be on a frontier? You have to change your equipment. You have to change your appliances. But this was not taken into account due to we do not have prices. So we are sure that this is important fact because changing equipment is usually not cheap, and for many households this is high burden. So but we do not have price data, for example, so the data that we have is retrospective data. We built it retrospective. So we have only two surveys in 2010 and 2014, and we then let's say they were asked what they did in the past when they did retrofit. But we do not have exact data on each year what they have. The capacity of appliances was calculated with the help of Institute Josef Stefan. They provided us with the only, let's say, technical data about the expected yearly consumption of this virus, but we do not have let's say how costly is that to switch from one fuel, changing the whole system. We do not have this data, but this could certainly be important.
Janez, if I may jump in. So actually the analysis takes capacity as given as fixed. So we only analyze the amount of energy that we can decrease. So in order to become energy efficient, given the capacity. So maybe this explains, and also this explains the result of 25% inefficiency as opposed to perhaps 40% estimated by the ministry, because we are taking capacity as fixed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
I think we need to move to the second paper by Lucas. Thank you again, Janez, for this very clear presentation. So, Lucas.
Thank you. I will stop sharing now.
Yeah, I guess you need to do so. Lucas, can you change? Can you?
Well, I contacted him by email, but he's not answering and not showing up. So maybe we should go to the next speaker.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe he will come later. So what I suggest is to move to the third representations, and maybe we got the opportunity to listen Lucas later. If we have time, we can have a more general discussion at the end of the session, in the case where Lucas does not show. So, Joachim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthieu. I'm presenting our work in progress about the value of energy efficiency in residential buildings, and we're asking the question, is that a matter of heterogeneity? This work is part of the Active Building Center work in the UK. And yeah, I welcome every comment. The article is now under review, and so you could really make an impact. So the value of energy efficiency in residential buildings, well, we all know the building sector accounts for a lot of CO2 emissions in the EU and in the world. 70 to 80% of the potential climate neutral buildings in 2050 already exist, so we have to refurbish a lot. But increasing refurbishment rates requires either subsidizing renovations, increasing the opportunity costs of non-renovation, or building regulations and standards. And last but not least, increasing market transparency. This can be achieved by energy efficiency ratings. These ratings remove uncertainty from the market, so the investors, buyers of buildings maybe are more in the situation to estimate the energy consumption and value according savings. Energy efficiency ratings are a comparable measure of energy consumptions. They have been introduced around 20 years ago in Europe and also the US. And the crucial question is, does this efficiency measured with the energy efficiency ratings capitalize when the buildings are sold? There are a lot of econometric analysis from around 2010 to 2016 around estimating whether there is a significant building price premium. And yeah, we are kind of reviewing this and check, first of all, which premiums we do expect from theory. Well, starting from very simple theory, then we check which premiums we do see in the data in these econometric analysis. Then, anticipating that is not what we see is not what we expect. That where does this difference come from? And I will draw some conclusions in the end. Well, the first thing is the question: what does theory tell us about the value of more efficient buildings on the market? Well, capitalization is only a problem if the owners change. If the owner is also the occupant, he will directly receive the savings and internalize every saving already in the investment phase. But frequently, buildings change the ownership, and in this case, the investor may not gain all the savings that may occur later. So we are, let's start from a position where in econometric methods have removed all building characteristics aside from the efficiency. The buildings so only differ with respect to efficiency, which is the energy consumption or the energy bill, depending on the measuring concept. And yeah, what would theory tell us? Well, guess you had the choice between an old energy inefficient building with a few fossil heating system and a new building highly insulated with a modern heating system, heat pump, for example. Well, let's assume that the old building over the next 10 years has an energy bill of 7,000 euros, while the more efficient one, the energy bill reduces to 1,000 euros. So if we now assume rational decision-making, identical buildings as we do here, and the preferences of the potential building buyers are homogeneous as are their expectations of future prices. In this case, the buyers don't mind which building they get as long as they have all the same value. And as the sellers do know that they will just implement the same value for all the buildings, which means the difference in the building is equivalent to the savings of the energy bill. Otherwise, the sellers wouldn't be able to sell their houses and suffer from higher costs. So what we expect is that the premium of the efficient building would be 6,000 euros in this case. Well, what are the consequences? Well, the price passes the savings that will arise for the buyer only in the future to the seller in the present. So it's a kind of time pass-through and interpersonal pass-through that is organized by the market price, if the market works in the way we just described. So the price hoovers the expected savings completely, and the cost difference should result in the same price differences. So that means that the relationship between premiums and operating costs should be linear. Well, let's see whether the word is as simple as that. The first example is a study, a econometric study for UK data, first et al. 2015. And we have the results here for the energy efficiency premium. Well, we have the dwelling price in £1,000 on the vertical axis and an average price of £170,000 for a building, and on the horizontal axis we have the annual energy bill with the according energy efficiency rating. Let me say a word to the share of dwellings in the household stock. We have around 40%, 45% D-rated buildings, less C and E rated ones, a little B rated, as well as F rated, and close to zero A rated buildings. Well, and what do we see in the analysis? Well, I've entered this here, the blue curve, which is far from linear, as we would expect if prices would result from very simple arbitrage. So you can see this here again. And yeah, the question is, what could we learn from such a, one question what could we learn from such a highly nonlinear premium function about the pass-through? Relatively little. The further question is, do we see that in decay only? Well, no, we don't. We have international data for France, Portugal, Ireland, and the Netherlands as well. And here we have the energy consumption only, not the energy bill directly as in the UK data. However, we assume that this is closely related to the energy bill anyway. And we see that the premium for the above average efficient buildings is by far 2 to 20 times higher than the below average rated buildings. So again, nonlinear premium seems to be a very stable pattern. Worth it to have a look at what's going on. Possible explanations are the heterogeneity of buyers. While income may raise the willingness to pay for some of the consumers to buy an energy efficient home, while the evidence, empirical evidence, is mixed with respect to that. However, I have to mention that we have barely any data on the combination of buyer characteristics and building characteristics. So we don't know what are the personal characteristics that are associated with specific building features. This is a lack, and we have to deal with it somehow. Furthermore, further explanation might be environmental friendly preferences. We basically have no data on that, so we don't know who's living in which house here. So I can't say anything with respect to that. Another explanation might be discounting, and we have some evidence that especially low discounting households prefer highly efficient equipment. And what we will do here is to extrapolate these findings to the residential sector. Another explanation might be unobservable features of the building. So if in this case, market supply and the volume of specific energy efficient buildings matters for the pricing and can have an impact on the building price premium for efficiency. So again, this limits the impact of arbitrage, and we can see nonlinear pricing as we saw it in the previous figures. Furthermore, there might be econometric problems. So unobserved building quality might have an impact because it's endogenous, and it might distort the estimates of the premium. There have been some attempts to mitigate this problem heuristically, and also by including the quality. Well, let me summarize these approaches. But in the end, I find it not that this is not a convincing concern against nonlinearity, though more could be done on this to improve the robustness of these results. A further impact could stem from the information. Well, there might be an option value of refurbishment, which stems from energy price uncertainties, and this could raise unrefurbished buildings, which are the especially low, the buildings with low energy efficiency. So applying to the below average buildings, an additional value would come up, and so explain the nonlinearity. Yeah, where maybe this premium should diminish as soon as we will tend to completely decarbonize the economy in 2050. This uncertainty would probably vanish, and so the nonlinearity should disappear. Well, I can't say anything definite around this idea. A further explanation might be bounded rationality. Well, we would have to have some very special misjudgments to explain the nonlinearity. So we're focusing here on the heterogeneity of bias, especially on the discount rate. That is a relatively good, there's relatively good evidence, and the heterogeneity of the buildings. So as arbitrage pricing doesn't apply directly, we need a little bit more sophisticated approach, which is a hedonic equilibrium model. With the variable x is the efficiency level, respectively the energy consumption. Different discounting rates. We have a normal distribution of the types of beta. I'll tell you in a few seconds what it is. This would result in a sorting equilibrium. So the low discounting buyers would ask for the very high efficient buildings, and vice versa. Building heterogeneity then introduces a kind of fuzzy sorting. So there are traits of specific buildings that each buyer prefers, and this blurs the sorting equilibrium a little bit. What we're looking for is a short-run equilibrium. For each efficiency level, there's a given supply of buildings, which is also normally distributed, and it equals market demand. So it is relatively reasonable, as we have in the UK, 30 million buildings and around 300,000 new buildings every year. So relatively small amount of new buildings each year. So assuming here for simplicity that the supply is fixed. I'm looking for a pricing premium Px depending on the efficiency level that solves the following problem. Well, individual demand is defined as a random utility model. So what you're paying is the price of the building, P, depending on X, minus the consumption, the energy consumption, and a stochastic impact of epsilon for each individual demanding a building. And we assume
5 minutes.
Sorry, yeah, okay. Yeah, demand equals supply. We have normally distributed supply, and the demand for the building weighted by the frequency of specific types. And yeah, this looks relatively heavy, but the solution is very straightforward. It's a linear term, it's a parabola, a linear term, and a quadratic term. And we have all the distributional aspects, the sigma, in the second term. So the second term captures the effect of the heterogeneity. What happens here is the following. We have, again, the building price premium vertical axis and the energy efficiency rating on the horizontal axis. The red term is the discounted energy cost. And we have the blue part of this price, the scarcity premium. Let's have a look at what's happening for a C-rated building. We have the discounted energy costs and the scarcity adding up so that we get a point P, the premium P. For a below average rated building, let's say an E building, these arrows point into opposite direction and reduce the premium. So in the end, we find a nonlinear premium, and this is exactly what we have been observing in the data. The intuition is relatively simple. If you want to sell something you have a lot of, like D-rated buildings, you need to go down with the price. Or putting it the other way around, if efficient buildings are scarce, you need to pay a premium. When we use this approach and interpolated the estimated price premiums by a parabola and identified parameters, in this way we could estimate the pass-through, that the pass-through is higher than 73%, which is relatively encouraging if we consider the complexity of the investment decision. I have the conclusion here. We see a nonlinearity of price premiums for efficiency. We consider this as puzzling with respect to arbitrage pricing. Arbitrage pricing is not able to explain this pattern. Heterogeneity of preferences and the perception of buildings. Building heterogeneity can explain it, but needs a bit more sophisticated concept. So supply in specific segments matters. So scarcity has an impact on the premium. And using this, we can estimate a pass-through of energy efficiency investment of about 73%. Efficiency capitalizes, not too bad, 73%, as I said. So we conclude that heterogeneity matters for the capitalization of efficiency. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the last slide is nice. So any question in the audience? Okay. I have questions.
Okay.
The first thing is, what about comfort gains? Because when you renovate your building, you also have improvement of the comfort for occupiers, and And so it means a positive correlation between the energy performance and comfort. And can you explain how do you control for that? Because I'm not sure that first in the first model you don't. And in the second approach, I do not see also how do you do that.
Yeah, it is not. Yeah, so okay. Well, let me say I make it easier for myself. So I assume that this has been dealt with in the econometric analysis. So quality should have been removed, but as I said, that's not very clear. So far, the approaches are lacking a bit of this. Yeah, you're perfectly right. Quality would be a problem. So more sophisticated estimation technologies would be needed to remove this impact. And yeah, this has not, yeah, so we have an analysis that from Finland that includes a quality variable. So, so the impact of quality improvements should be captured in this variable. And so we shouldn't have any problems with that after estimating the model. Yeah, this is basically the way I deal with it. So I can't do any empirical analysis within this because I don't have a data set for it. It was just that I saw there's something strange in this paper. So now I saw there's something strange in the data. So I thought it might be worth to check whether it can be explained with heterogeneity assumptions. And I'm not able to verify whether the price premiums have been estimated correctly. Well, let me put it like this.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. Yeah, it's one thing that I really like in your paper is that you try to deal with the imperfect competition on the housing market, okay? Because I'm an IO guy initially, and what strikes me in this literature is that for somebody like me, this market is highly imperfect, you know, and in particular, you have huge informational asymmetries between the buyers and the sellers, and you have a very high product differentiation. So yeah, so I really like this aspect in the second approach. But I do not understand clearly, but you measure it essentially, the identifications relies on the functional forms that you choose. And so this polynomial scarcity, is it right? Or can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I can say something on that. It's not an assumption. It's really the result. So depending on the distributional assumptions of the building stock we have at the moment, normally distributed, and the traits, the individual traits like discounting rates, the thing gets a parabola. It's not an assumption. It's just the formalism that implies it. It was very surprising. So when I started to take a look at the formalism, I was really surprised that it is very simple. It is a very simple solution. So it's not an assumption. It's the result of the formalism and the assumptions behind the distributions.
Is it usual to do that, or is it a contribution? Is it a methodological contribution of this paper, or is it usual to do this?
Well, actually, I don't know. It's the hedonic approach is established, and it works a bit like that. I haven't seen any applications of the hedonic approach with respect to yeah.
I mean about the imperfect competition thing. Right?
Yeah, well, it's not actually. We have. Could I say this is imperfect competition? Well, we don't have supply in there. Supply is given. Yeah, we have the building stock, and it changes only a bit. So we have a given supply of buildings, and the individuals choose which building they want to live in. And this decision is a bit blurred by individual perception of the buildings, like I like the yellow building, or a building that's very close to something else. So not everything may be explained by the variables we can observe. There's some residual heterogeneity of the buildings, and of course the important aspect that the buyers are heterogeneous, completely different with respect to, in our case, and with our assumption with respect to the discounting, and so they are sorting.
Okay. Other questions? So maybe last remark, I come back on comfort. Maybe you should, when you try to explain the non-linearity between the price premiums and the energy performance, and when you explain that the premium is lower for poorly efficient dwellings, maybe you can discuss a bit more this comfort aspect, because what is what is told, I mean, is that comfort improvements are particularly important for inefficient dwellings, etc. You know, all these ideas. So just a suggestion for your paper. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. I think Richard Green has a question or a remark.
Yeah. Richard.
Yeah, well, I say I'd be happy to have the question on comfort answered first. Mine was a sort of implications thing. But I'm conscious there may be time if the other speaker ever shows up.
You can, because we have one paper less, in fact.
Yeah.
An unexpected.
Okay. The thoughts that I had was, you showed a few slides earlier that British you were too polite to say so, but you showed that British buildings are pretty rubbish. Very few highly rated ones. If we did get to the much more efficient buildings, then what would that do to if there was a bigger supply of efficient buildings, what would that do to the premiums? And would it make it less apparently worthwhile to invest in the efficiency, or would the pass-through still exist? The underlying pass-through.
Yeah, I don't know. The dynamics is very complicated, actually. Well, we could switch to the long-run equilibrium, which would be that prices equal marginal cost, and in this case, we would have a exponential distribution with the with a lot of A-rated buildings and less and less efficient rated buildings. But the transition is possibly very complicated because it would move to the left. The premium would move to the left to more efficient ones. But in the same way, the rating, the C-rated, for example, would lose scarcity as you build more on that. So I can't really see what the dynamics, how the dynamics are. They would be relatively complicated, complicated dynamics, and you would, of course, have to anticipate how what the building buyers or the sellers anticipate on the price premium, and as this is also dependent on the scarcity, so I can't really foresee what that means for the medium run development of the building market. At least at the moment, the incentives are high to build a couple of highly rated buildings like A and B rated ones.
Thanks.
So thank you very much. So maybe we can move to the last paper of the session. Lee, you can share your screen.
Yes, I will. That should be visible to everyone now.
Yes, it is.
So good evening from Australia. This one,
great. Australia. Hello.
And in this paper, we're looking not just at energy efficiency, but how that affects people's ability to respond to time-varying electricity rates. So time-varying electricity rates are one of the many tools that might be able to help transition to renewable generation that's more time-variant. You only have solar when the sun is shining. And so the rationale behind time-varying rates being helpful for the transition is that if you can shift the timing of demand, you don't need to try as hard to shift the timing of supply for these things that are generating at fixed times. They're one of many other tools alongside batteries and storage, which are also going to be necessary. So one of the simplest types of these time-varying rates are time-of-use rates. Static time of use rates, where people pay more for their electricity during on-peak time periods, with the rationale being that if your electricity is more expensive during peak times, you will want to shift it to the off-peak times when there's relatively more supply available to meet that demand. Just checking if I can't see the chat, so I hope that wasn't anyone saying they couldn't hear me. And in some previous research, there were some indications that time of use rates might be disproportionately bad for some of the more vulnerable sociodemographic groups who could face relatively worse health and cost outcomes on time of use rates. So seeing higher bill increases after switching from flat to time of use, or if they didn't see higher bill increases, then they would see a greater increase in medical visits related to temperature after switching to time of use. And so one of the possible explanations for that difference in outcomes by these different demographic groups is that the more vulnerable sociodemographic groups are also much more likely to be living in buildings that are not very energy efficient. And this differing energy efficiency could be underlying some of the differences in cost and health impacts for people on time varying rates. So for example, some prior work in Australia, which looked at peak pricing events, which are a little bit different from static time of use rates. People get a notification that they need to curtail their use during a particular time. And people experienced a really wide range of comfort impacts during those. So some people noticed no difference inside their house. Some people found it so uncomfortable that they had to leave and go to a cooler location, like a beach or a library. And some people just gave up and turned the AC on and paid the peak pricing events. So that could be something that's related to energy efficiency, where if you have a less efficient building with poor insulation, it's not going to retain that temperature as well at a comfortable level if you're not continually pumping energy into it. And in Australia in particular, there's still a lot of, say, single glazed buildings in the housing stock. There's a lot of buildings that are not very good energy efficiency. So some of them do, the temperature changes quite rapidly if there's not continual energy use to maintain it. So for time of use rates, there's often a suggestion that, well, maybe you can preheat or pre-cool the building during the off-peak or shoulder rate times when the electricity is cheaper, as a way to avoid using it during these on-peak times. But if you have a poorly insulated building, it's not going to retain that temperature very well without continual energy use. So we think that people living in low energy efficiency buildings are going to have a harder time adjusting to respond to those time of use rates or other time varying rates, but there hasn't been anything that's looked at that really. So what we really want to understand in the current work is whether energy efficiency of homes plays a role in residential ability to manage costs on these time varying electricity rates, and whether that's different for the low versus high efficiency homes. So we looked at a sample of several thousand residents in the Australian Capital Territory, which is, it's not huge, it's got about 300,000 people in it. One of the advantages is that here there is mandated disclosure of energy efficiency ratings when a building is rented or sold. And it is a place where you do need to be using artificial heating and cooling at various times of the year to maintain comfortable temperatures. indoors. And so we worked with a utility partner to get a sample of households that had switched to time of use rates, which are one of the things that's offered in the ACT. But because they were people who, they could have switched for a variety of reasons. They might have switched because they installed solar and that became their default rate. They might have switched because they upgraded their meter and it became their default rate, or they might have switched because they looked at their billing options and thought it was cheaper. So we want to try to control for the potential self-selection. So we use coarse and exact matching to select a control group of households that remained on flat rates and didn't switch throughout the same time period, but they were comparable to the households that did switch on factors that you would expect to predict getting more benefit from time of use rates. And so I have more detail on that on the next slide. And we combine that coarse and exact matching with a two-way fixed effects to consider heterogeneous treatment effects on household bills as a function of EER. I'll just, and so we started with about almost 90,000 households that we could source the EER ratings for. The EER is a combined measure of the expected energy use by the house to maintain a comfortable temperature. And so it combines a couple of different things. It combines things like the insulation level. It combines things like the heating system, the cooling system that's installed. It also, in the models that they run to determine the EER number, they also include like an expectation that, say, if the building has thermal curtains, that occupants will close those at appropriate times of day to try to retain heat in the house. So the same, there's a couple of different software programs that run these models to get the EER that are assigned to the households. Excuse me, and they get assigned a number between 1 and 10. And then we matched this EER information to a list of potential treatment households from our utility partner. They had to do the address matching on their end. They couldn't give us all of the households to do our own full control matching, so we were able to pre-identify some potential control households on some sociodemographics, and then we cleaned the data, which resulted in quite a large data loss because we had to take out ones that had more complex rates so that we could see the effect we were looking for. We could see the effect of flat versus time of use. And then we ran a second round of chem on the final set of data to match treatment households to comparable control households. And because we noticed in visual inspection of the data that there were quite a few cases where it looked like the metering had been disrupted around the time that they switched between a flat and a time of use rate, we ran different analyses comparing if there was any difference if we dropped the quarter of the switch in a lead of that versus not. We didn't see a whole lot of difference with that. So in the coarse and exact matching, we compared on things that would be expected to affect electricity bills because these would be things that would, you would expect to influence how much financial benefit a household might get out of time of use rates. Excuse me. And so would affect likelihood of switching. So we selected households that were comfortable on income, occupancy, education. I'm just going to let you read that slide, maybe. And one of the more complicated things that we had was, as I mentioned, if a household installed solar, that could act as a trigger to switch to time of use rates. So we compared whether households, whether they never had solar, whether they sometimes had solar, or whether they had solar throughout the entire data period that we had. And we also expected that electricity bills would be influenced by the household's gas use. If they're using gas for heating, they don't need to rely on electricity for that. So it's not going into the time varying part of the rates. And so we also matched households on that, as well as on the energy efficiency rating. So in the end, we had a relatively small sample left after the data cleaning, but still over 100 treatment households, even in the smallest one. And we had data for up to 24 quarters per household. So the electricity billing is quarterly rather than monthly. So we wanted to confirm first the assumption that the low energy efficiency households would be using more energy than the high energy efficiency households. And so this is a simple descriptive graph that we also confirmed with a couple of different regression checks. And our starting point was that yes, the households that were less energy efficient in their ratings were indeed using more electricity than the more efficient ones. And so we ran our fixed effects regressions. They control for the unit, the household, and time, the quarter, and also have a term for the chem to compare households to like households. We didn't find too many of the terms were significant actually, although the direction was opposite from what we expected. But we did find that the households that don't have gas are not energy efficient were the ones that were more likely to see a decrease in their electricity bills after switching to time of use rates, which is the opposite to the direction we went out expecting. And although you can see they're not significant, they're the directions, the coefficients, they're sort of consistent with it generally being the opposite of what we went out started out expecting. Where the higher efficiency households were seeing maybe a slight increase on time of use if they're seeing any change at all, whereas the low efficiency ones are seeing maybe a slight decrease if they're seeing any change at all. And so in terms of why would we be seeing this, first off, it's somewhat positive that we didn't find any evidence that the low energy efficiency households we're experiencing worse financial impacts of switching to time of use rates. But in terms of why this, and especially these ones that don't have gas, so these ones must be reliant on electricity for heating. We might have expected them to be the most affected. But as a sort of function of the history of the energy efficiency ratings in Australia, the minimum standards were introduced pretty recently in 2003. And so all of the homes that are over the minimum standard are actually landing in our high efficiency group. So they're all more recent constructions. And there's still a lot of households in the ACT that do not have central heating. The ones that do, that have either a heat pump or that have gas central heating, they're much more likely to have a thermostat control. Whereas there's a lot of the households that don't have any form of heating built in, of which there are a few in the low energy efficiency group. They're much more likely to be they will be relying on room by room heating. And a lot of this can be electric resistance heaters, which are quite inefficient. And so people here tend to have, I think compared to say the US, a fairly strong awareness that if you're using the heater, you are contributing quite a lot to your electricity bill. And so these households may be, with the room by room heating, may be much more aware of their energy use and much more likely to respond to the time of use rates to turn it down. Whereas the high energy efficiency ones are perhaps more likely to just use a set and forget strategy. So to check this a little bit, we looked at how their total usage was affected. their total electricity usage. And this is, it maps pretty well to what we found with the electricity bills. The group that we saw reducing their electricity bills also curtailed their total electricity usage. So this suggests that even if they were shifting some of their usage, their dominant strategy, or at least a large part of their strategy, was just to use less electricity in total after shifting to the time of use rates. So they weren't they were, if they were responding to those higher on-peak prices, they weren't trying to use a preheating strategy. And especially those ones without gas had to rely on electricity for heating. They didn't have, unless they had a wood burner, they didn't have an alternative option. And so we expected at the outset that they would be less able to make use of preheating. We thought that we would see this manifest as higher electricity bills after switching to time of use. But what it actually looks like they're doing, as far as we can tell, is that it looks like they're just turning their electricity off, or turning their heating down during those peak rates, perhaps. We can't tell from the data whether their peak use changed, because the utility only tracked time variant electricity use for people on time varying rates. So we don't know what the peak use was when they were on flat rates. But this could make sense to some extent. You know, if there's no point in preheating if your house isn't going to retain it. So this could just be a sort of logical response to the more expensive electricity. But it probably means that they're getting a bit cold. So what we can't look at whether they changed their on-peak use, because that data wasn't tracked for the pre-switch for anyone who wasn't on time of use. But we can look for the different energy efficiency rates, which households sort of appeared to have more favorable load profiles in using a larger proportion of their electricity during on-peak versus off-peak times. And this is again sort of consistent with the idea that maybe the high energy efficiency households are just sort of setting their thermostat and ignoring it. They have a much smaller proportion of their usage typically falling during the off-peak times compared to the low energy efficiency households. And sort of surprisingly initially, is that out of the low energy efficiency households, the ones that are using the greatest proportion during off-peak times are actually the ones that do have gas heating. This might be explained, possibly, we don't have enough data to know definitively, but they would have a smaller proportion of their usage, that electricity usage, that wouldn't be easy to shift. So if you want the house to be warm at a specific time and you don't have good insulation, you're going to need a heater on at that specific time. Whereas something like laundry or dishwasher, perhaps it's much easier compared to heating in a home with poor insulation to move that to an off-peak time. And so what are the implications that we've come to so far? It doesn't look like the low energy efficiency homes are at a disadvantage financially. If anything, they seem to be saving a little bit more on the time of use rates. But they seem to be doing this by curtailing total use rather than by taking advantage of the cheaper time varying rates, or the cheaper off-peak times on the time varying rates. And if the household, for those households that don't have gas for heating, that are curtailing total use, this suggests that they might be making their homes colder by curtailing that use after switching. So although they seem to have lower bills on time of use, that's not necessarily an indication of better outcomes. So those are sort of the temperatures for a couple of days ago. You can see the darker times during the off-peak rates. They're quite cold. You would want to be running some heating, particularly during that morning peak. And it is currently winter here. And so these findings overall suggest that people living in low energy efficiency homes are not being financially disadvantaged, at least with the rate designs used here, which are they're a bit flatter than some time of use rates. The sort of, I think it's about a 10-cent difference. out of, with the peak ones being 29 cents per kilowatt hour. Future research should consider whether these findings about the building energy efficiency are robust to other jurisdictions with different types of time of use rate design, and potentially with different categories of housing stock. And in particular, we want to understand more about the behavioral responses underlying that effect, and whether these lower energy efficiency households are engaging in a response that would invite worse comfort impact in an attempt to avoid the cost impacts. Just barely on time. So thanks for not giving you skipped the warning after my coughing fit. Thank you. So open for questions now.
Yeah, sorry for that. I was expecting that you were very efficient, and you are. Okay, so questions.
The chat window to show up though. So apologies if there are any questions in there.
So there's a questions by Tarun Khanna. So I read it. Thanks for the presentations. Finding important, there appears to be a trade-off between the various efficiency measures in the building sector, energy efficiency versus TOU. Would it be safe to say that as a building becomes more efficient over time, TOU measures would become less effective in reducing peak demand?
I don't feel safe saying that yet, because there's still the theory that it should be more possible to use preheating or pre-cooling in a more efficient building. The reason that that's not happening, we're not sure. Let me think this through. Well, I mean, they'll become less effective in that your total peak will be smaller if everyone lives in an extremely efficient house. If you take that to the extreme, if everyone is living in a passive house, then there is no contribution to peak demand in any case. But we're a long way from that. And there's, I would expect that there would be some kind of middle ground where you would have maybe as you have a more efficient house, clearly not at the level that we're seeing here. So if people were deciding to maintain the same level of comfort, which they don't seem to have decided to do, then we would have expected.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Going slightly in circles. I think sort of I definitely think we want to continue pursuing the more efficient buildings as a peak demand reduction strategy in itself. And it is possible that, you know, you won't need as much of the time varying measures when you have much lower demand in total. But I think in the meantime, we need to understand a bit more about what exactly is going on there. It is a useful thought exercise.
Okay, thank you. I have a request. Can you tell us a bit more about the size of the effects in terms of percentage, because you essentially comment on the size.
Sorry, the size of the effect, as in the coefficient, or?
No, the size in percentage. I mean, when you say that, for instance, there is no cost effect on the EER, what is the difference in the size of the costs with the low ER, between the low ER and the high ER, you know, stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
not the coefficient, but the.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we did run a separate test and found that it was a statistically significant difference. I don't remember the details beyond that we tested it and it was a significant difference between the two different groups. But it was enough that it was showing up that it was not just sort of a spurious difference. It was that there was a difference that was statistically significant between the low and the high when we ran sort of a t-test as a secondary comparison that my co-author ran, and I need to finish getting the full details from her.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so thank you very much, Lee. And except if people want to make general comments, because we have time due to the absence of Lucas. So if you have last minute questions or comments, feel free to ask. No? Okay, so thank you very much for the nice session. I wish that you will enjoy the rest of the conference like I do. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.